the myth, the magic, the mystery, the majesty, the good, the evil, the danger, the daring, the combat, the courage, and Laurence Olivier as Zeus.
How should we start this episode?
I don't know, with a rad rave party?
Why a rad rave party?
Why not a rad rave party?
It doesn't really connect to our theme today or anything.
Okay, but could you picture Zeus at a rave party? Shooting out different colored lightning bolts, just raving it up?
I'm seeing Zeus in a wife beater with a backwards baseball cap on and sunglasses. Shooting lightning bolts around.
Yeah.
Zeus, throw a great party. First off, he knows Dionysus, the god of wine and celebration.
Dionysus.
You say tomato, I say tomato. He's famous for his ways with the ladies.
Yes, he is.
Though depending on how you read those old Greek myths, his ways with the ladies were not always so consensual.
All the more reason why he'd be a great raver.
When we were in high school, you were pretty into this Greek mythology thing.
Yeah, that was when I was in high school. I haven't read up on it in at least 10 years.
You used to be stuck on this idea that in the Greek Orthodox beliefs, when Christ ascended into heaven, first he went down into the Grecian underworld and freed all the souls.
That is Greek Orthodox religion.
But at the time, I didn't believe you. You would frame it as, he went down into hell and he pimp-slapped Hades.
First of all, it wasn't hell, it was Tartarus. Second of all,
The underworld.
Tartarus is the name of the underworld.
I thought Tartarus was this fiery pit where they hid the monsters. Human souls went to the underworld.
The thing with the underworld is, it's got three names. It's called the underworld, it's called Hades, and it's called Tartarus.
I'm going to say underworld to distinguish it from the god Hades. But Tartarus was this fiery pit where Zeus threw the Cyclopses and the Hecatoncheires and all these monsters.
Sure.
Today we're talking about Greek mythology, which in a lot of ways is really the foundation for all of Western narrative storytelling.
Sure.
There are things that predated Mesopotamian and ancient Chinese mythology was around the same time. The Greeks introduced this concept of tragedy and comedy, though what we define as tragedy and comedy is a little different than how they defined it. And going back and looking at these old myths, the Greeks had a slightly different understanding of morality than we do. If you were Zeus, you could do whatever the fuck you wanted. If you were Zeus, you could turn yourself into an eagle or a bull, or my favorite was a golden shower and impregnate women that way. The man got around. In Christian theology, we have one god and he's perfect. But in Greek mythology, they have lots of gods and they are as flawed as humanity is.
They're just immortal and have powers.
Not just Zeus, many of the gods are famous for their philandering and their jealousy.
But you know what I like most about Greek mythology, or I always find the most interesting?
What's that?
Is how the gods reproduce. And I guess we'll get to that later.
I've always thought the birth of Aphrodite was especially unusual.
That one's good, but my favorite is the birth of Athena.
How she burst out of Zeus's skull?
Yeah, his skull splits open and she flies out and
Fully
takes form.
formed.
It's mind-boggling.
Obviously, Greek mythology is a huge source of information, and there's a lot of things we could talk about. But I've narrowed it down to about a dozen specific myths and monsters that we're going to be talking about tonight.
Okay.
But there's so much. I have trouble keeping track of all the different gods. The Greeks had a god for everything.
Yeah.
So that's why you were fascinated with Greek mythology in high school.
It's just the weirdness of it. How different it is. And to think how they pretty much invented comic books. Hear me out.
No, I totally understand what you mean.
Zeus is your Superman. Hermes is the Flash.
I don't know if I would say so much the gods as some of the demigods. Hercules, Achilles, these were your first superheroes. Jason and the Argonauts is basically the first superhero team-up story.
Yeah, pretty much.
Obviously, there's a literary precedence there. It's always been this tradition of heroes. If you go back to Mesopotamian myth, you have Gilgamesh. The Greeks have some of the best heroes and some of the best monsters, for sure.
Oh, yeah. And we're definitely going to get into some of those later.
If you're going to start with Greek mythology, you have to start with what the ancient Greeks believed was the origin of the universe.
The oldest stories ever told are written in the stars. Stories of time before man and gods, when Titans ruled the earth. The Titans were powerful, but their reign was ended by their own sons, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades.
How did the universe begin, according to the ancient Greeks?
With theogony.
Theogony, which I believe means the birth of the gods.
Something like that.
Yeah. In the beginning, there was chaos, and out of chaos came Gaia, the earth, and Uranus, the sky.
Yeah. These aren't humanoids, physical embodiments of the sky. Chaos is just chaos. He's not the artist formerly known as Chaos. He just is.
Chaos is both the concept of chaos, this blank space that existed before the universe was born, but also a goddess, which is an interesting dynamic.
And that's the same with Uranus and Gaia. They don't have a humanoid shape, they just are.
Gaia and Uranus' children are the Titans, the first gods, if you will.
Yeah.
Can you name the original Titans off the top of your head without looking at my list here?
Cronus, Hyperion, Rhea... No. Oh, wait. Atlas, Prometheus...
Though I believe Mimosine, Prometheus, and Atlas are technically the second generation of Titans. Helios, Prometheus, Atlas, I believe, are Hyperion's children.
Whatever.
But
yeah, Oceanus.
Kronos is the central figure in this story, though.
Yeah, he's the one that cuts the balls off.
All these Titans are representative of certain concepts, like Kronos is the god of time. Not to get too in-depth here, but obviously all these things would influence our language. What do you call a book of maps? An atlas. The sun is full of helium. Chrono is the syntax word for time. One of the things that fascinates me about theogony, this concept of sons revolting against their fathers. Cronus revolts against his father. He revolts against Uranus. He cuts his father's balls off a sickle.
Okay, let's talk about that for a second. It confuses me because your source says that Aphrodite was born from the sea foam. Let's face it, he jizzed in the fucking ocean, out pops Aphrodite.
But it's not the jizz.
The point is...
10 minutes in, we're already talking about jizz.
If we go by what your source says...
GreekMythology.com.
That would mean that Aphrodite is not, in fact, a goddess. She is a Titan, because she would be the daughter of the father of the Titans.
But she's considered an Olympian. Yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting question.
Unless I read it wrong when I was younger, I thought that Zeus castrates Cronus as well. But see, your source doesn't say that.
I remember reading that as well. It's very possible these are two different versions of the same story. Obviously, we're talking about tales that are thousands of years old, and I think there are many different variations.
And interpretations, yeah. That's the one I always went by, was that it was Cronus's testicles that fell and created...
These are nutty ideas. The Titan cuts off the balls of the manifestation of the sky, throws it across the world, the blood and jizz that leaks from the severed balls create a bunch of different monsters and things, and then it falls in the ocean, and out of the foam, not out of the balls, emerges Aphrodite on a clam. The Titans weren't the only children of Gaia and Uranus. There was a breed of monster that...
There was the Cyclops, which I think is plural for Cyclops.
I always just say Cyclopses, but I guess Cyclops is correct.
And then the Hecatoncheires.
The Hecatoncheires you really want to talk about.
I know, he's got like 100 arms and 100 hands with 10,000 fingers. What the hell?
How do you even imagine something that has 1,000 arms? I always pictured a giant ball of arms. It's just this really fucking bizarre monster. Cronus kills his dad, and the Titans are ruling pretty over the universe, and he fucks his sister Rhea, and they have a whole bunch of kids. And that's the Olympian, will be the primary gods of Greek mythology. And name as many Olympians as you can think of.
Alright, Aphrodite, Zeus, Athena, Hera, Ares, Poseidon, Hades, Dionysus, Demeter, Artemis. Well, there's Hermes, Apollo.
I think you hit all the big ones except for Hephaestus and Hestia.
Yeah.
Zeus and Poseidon and Hades are the main three brothers. Cronus has heard this prophecy. One of his children will overthrow him, so he swallows all of them. I'm sure you've seen the famous Goya painting. He's eating this bloody torso. The myths have always made it sound like he swallows them whole.
Yeah.
Except for Zeus, who's traded out with a giant boulder.
That's how you know he swallows them whole. Chomp on a fucking rock, that's gonna hurt.
Zeus has snuck away and does emerge and does kill his father. And there's a word for the war between the Olympians and the Titans. Titanomachy.
Titanomachy.
War of the Titans. I'm really surprised we've never seen a big budget CGI movie version of this story.
Well, actually, there is a really good cutscene version of this.
Oh, in God of War?
In God of War.
Oh, I knew God of War would have to come up eventually. The story just keeps going on and on because after Zeus imprisons the Titans, his grandmother, Gaia, is still pissed at him. He locked up the Hecatoncheires and the Cyclops, who were her children. So she creates a new monster. She mates with the ocean and creates this monster called Typhon, who's the greatest monster in all of Greek mythology. And
yeah, what does he look like again?
He's generally depicted as man with snakes for arms. He's the size of a mountain. Eventually the gods lock underneath of Mount Etna, where he hooks up with Echidna, and they become the father and mother of all the other monsters in Greek mythology. And I've always been fascinated by that idea, that there's this giant monster underneath a mountain who has birthed every other monster in the world. The general epicness of this story, of how massive a tale this is. It's got fucking and monsters and castration and all sorts of craziness.
I am Odysseus.
The greatest adventure of all time. An epic voyage into worlds beyond imagining. An incredible story of wonders beyond belief. The Odyssey.
Aside from the creation myth, what's another big tentpole of Greek mythology?
The Odyssey.
Yeah, the Odyssey.
From Homer.
And there's debate over whether Homer was a literal person. A lot of historians now believe Homer was actually a collective of writers and not one individual.
Whatever.
The story of Odysseus.
He goes on his grand journey, the Odyssey.
If you will. He's a veteran in the Trojan War, and it takes him 10 years to get home. A lot of the characters from the Trojan War, the Trojan Horse, Helen of Troy, Hector and Achilles, these are all things that have been absorbed into our everyday language. Everybody knows what the Trojan Horse is, and it's a term used in computing for a type of virus, and everybody knows what their Achilles tendon is, which is named for the famous way Achilles dies, his whole weak spot. It takes him 10 years to get home because essentially he pisses off the ocean god. Taken captive by this nymph named Calypso who holds him captive for years. No, oh no, I'm held captive by a beautiful woman and she has sex with me all the time. Oh, this is hell.
And then there's Circe,
who turns some of his crew members into pigs.
That's like her thing.
Before that, he encounters Polytheus, the Cyclops. That's always been one of my favorite stories in the Odyssey. Blinds him with a giant stick.
Yeah.
Who did this to me? And he says, my name is No Man. And when the Cyclops says to his Cyclops brothers, no man has blinded me. Oh man, no man blinded you? What the hell? Clearly the gods are pissed. And they just stay away. And do you remember how Odysseus and his crew escaped from Polyphemus's cave? Cyclops had a bunch of sheep, and they tied themselves to the bottom of the sheep. Polytheus would feel the tops of the sheep as they passed from his cave now that he's blind. But let's just talk about that idea of the Cyclops. A one-eyed giant that eats people.
Yeah, that's pretty gnarly.
Almost every monster in Greek mythology is cannibalistic.
They always eat people.
This very strong cultural taboo that they had to reinforce: if you eat people, you're bad. Don't eat people. And then they encounter the sirens, and Odysseus lashes himself to the bow of his ship so that he's not...
You hear the siren call.
Yeah, he's the siren. That's another word that's been absorbed into our everyday lexicon. Anytime a beautiful woman lures men to her, she's called a siren.
Yeah. There was a siren on the old 1966 Batman show, too. See, look, I can even bring Batman into this.
When can't you?
There was a great siren episode in Charmed.
Speaking of superheroes, there are a couple of different villainesses named Siren. And Aquaman, Mira's evil twin sister, is named Siren. Most versions of the Sirens just portray them as these beautiful women, but in the original myths, they're actually fish, women, bird hybrids.
Yeah, they're weird.
Sometimes the siren is conflated with the mermaid.
Yeah. These sirens have two tails.
Yes, they do. If you've ever really looked at the Starbucks logo, you'd know that. Your favorite part, or at least the part that you've always talked to me about, is Charybdis and Scylla.
Right, Scylla and Charybdis?
However the hell you say it.
That shit's fucking awesome. Scylla especially. Dog and snake, or is it wolf and snake?
Scylla is usually depicted as a cross between a beautiful woman, a snake, and wolves. That's actually a bit of an exaggeration, because I believe in the original myths, they just say that it's a monster with 9 heads or something.
Whatever. Charybdis, jagged, toothy whirlpool.
Yeah,
doom.
It's a whirlpool, but it's also a monster.
It's like a sentient whirlpool.
Yeah, isn't that wacky? Rereading the synopsis of the Odyssey, I just kept thinking, Odysseus really needed a better crew. Half of the shit that happens just because his crew is incompetent.
Yeah.
One side there's this giant monster living on the rocks that eat people, on the other side there's a giant whirlpool. At that point he loses the ship. Did we mention why Poseidon's pissed at him?
Because he doesn't thank him for helping him, right?
In some versions, that's what happens. In other versions, it's because Polyphemus the Cyclops is Poseidon's son.
But the one I'm familiar with is the one Poseidon sends Odysseus a gift or something that helps him win the war.
Right.
He scoffs in Poseidon's face, if you will. And
if there's any reoccurring moral in all the Greek myths besides don't eat people, it's don't piss off the gods.
Yeah.
But eventually, Odysseus does get back home. It takes him 10 years. For 10 years, these guys have been squatting in his house, waiting for a chance to bang his wife. How does Odysseus prove that he is, in fact, Odysseus?
He does all the challenges.
Yeah, he shoots an arrow through a bunch of axes. And then I believe he goes nuts and kills all the dudes that have been trying to rape his wife for the last decade, which is maybe not an entirely unreasonable response.
Probably not.
And I never understood in high school when we had to read the Odyssey. All my classmates were like, I hate this. This sucks so much.
Actually, I really enjoyed the Odyssey.
Why do we gotta read this boring book? Yeah, like, how can you not love? It's got monsters and murder and war and
romance. It's got something for everyone.
It's crazy.
It could almost be the perfect story.
Some historians would probably argue for that. At the very least, the Odyssey is influential on the structure of narrative, this idea of the hero's journey.
Yeah.
And as far as I can tell, there's only been one straight-up literal adaptation of the Odyssey, which was a miniseries from 1997 with Armand Assante.
The one I saw.
I watched it in school after we read the story, and I remember it being really, really cheesy.
Yeah.
But there have been a couple other loose adaptations. Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Is apparently heavily inspired by the Odyssey.
Really?
There's the Cyclops. John Goodman's character has one eye. And,
yeah.
And then there's the beautiful girls bathing in the lake, which are the sirens.
Well, they even refer to them as sirens.
Yeah.
They don't turn him into a horny toad.
Yeah, there are a lot of little references to the Odyssey. Apparently, in 1981, an anime called Ulysses 31 was produced, and this was adaptation of the Odyssey set in the 31st century. And one last thing before we move on is, I don't know if you've ever noticed, but there's a production production company called TSG Entertainment.
Isn't that the one where the guy shoots an arrow through Axis?
Yeah, that's the logo. It's Odysseus shooting the arrow through the Axis. And every time that comes up, because I'm a nerd, I think, oh, well, there you go.
This is the story of a time long ago. A time of myth and legend, when the ancient gods were petty and cruel, and they plagued mankind with suffering. Only one man dared to challenge their power: Hercules.
Talked about a lot of famous figures in Greek mythology already, Zeus and Odysseus. But what do you think is the most famous character to emerge from Greek mythology?
See, here's the thing. The name that people know him by is actually Roman.
Yeah!
He's actually the greatest Roman hero. Hercules is what everybody knows him as, but his Greek name is Hercules. I don't know about you, but I don't split that hair. I prefer Hercules.
Well, that's just what everybody calls him.
Hercules! 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 Hercules!
Jesus Christ. I don't know why they use the other Greek names except for Heracles. It's never Hercules the son of Jupiter. It's always Hercules the son of Zeus. I don't know why that is.
Maybe the 90s TV show.
It was even before then. If you look at the old Steve Reeves Hercules movies from the 60s.
Well, yeah, there's those.
Yeah. I don't know when that emerged.
And wasn't it like a Hercules in New York or whatever?
Arnold Schwarzenegger's first movie, Hercules in New York, which is a terrible, terrible film. Really, if we just want to talk about Hercules' influence on pop culture, the ones we remember from our childhood is the Disney cartoon and the 90s TV show of Kevin Sorbo. But before then, there was hundreds of Hercules movies made in Italy in the 50s and 60s.
The Sam Raimi Greek TV shows.
Yeah, the syndicated TV shows from the 90s.
While I enjoy both of them, Xena is better.
I think everybody likes Xena better than Hercules.
Is it because of the sex appeal with Lucy Lawless and Gabrielle?
I can't really say. I was never a regular watcher of either show. I've never sat down and watched either series in their entirety. I would catch episodes here and there.
Xena ran longer.
Yeah, it did. I think Xena ran for 6 years and Hercules ran for 4.
Yeah.
From what I've read, it just seems to me that Xena was a better written show.
And then it had hot babes kicking ass.
And I think that was certainly a big contributing factor. And that Xena has this massive lesbian following. Because Xena and Gabrielle are a vaguely veiled lesbian couple.
There's episodes where they get more than vaguely lesbian.
Yeah, it's barely subtext. They've been talking about maybe doing a new Xena series. Lucy Lawless has said, if that comes to pass, Xena and Gabrielle will just be a couple.
Honestly, I think we're in a time now where that would be okay.
Absolutely. Getting back to the mythological
Hercules. We were
Hercules.
still technically on topic.
We are, because Xena is an Amazon, and Amazons come up in Hercules' story.
Xena is not an Amazon. Gabrielle is the queen of the Amazon.
Oh, well, you see, you know more about the show than I do. Like I said,
I've watched a lot of this show.
You like Lucy Lawless, huh?
You know, she should have played Wonder Woman back in the day. Let's go. At the very least, they should have gotten her to play Hippolyta in the movie.
I wish they would have. Maybe they can get her to play Circe in the sequel.
Hollywood, make that shit happen, because we know you listen to our podcast.
Oh, yeah. Out of all of Zeus's bastard children, of which there are so many, Hercules, or Heracles, is by far the most famous. And even little aspects of the story, like when he was a baby and serpents were sent to kill him and he strangled the serpents, you know?
Yeah, and then when he was sucking on the teeth of Hera.
I just read this today. I did not know about this, that Hercules is responsible for the creation of the Milky Way. He was being suckled by Hera and he pulled back his head with such force and suction that it caused Hera to shoot off a stream of breast milk that formed the Milky Way in the sky. Damn, Greece, you nasty. What's famous about the character are the 12 labors of Hercules.
Yeah.
What people don't remember is what caused those 12 labors. The reason he had to repent.
Didn't he kill his wife and kids or something?
Yeah, Herod drove him insane and he murdered his wife and children, which they left out of the Disney version.
Did they ever talk about why Hera hated him?
Hera hates all of Zeus's illegitimate children.
So why was she breastfeeding him?
Can't tell you that, man. I'm not a scholar. I skimmed some Wikipedia articles this morning. There's a bigger story with the 12 labors. He's doing it because some king is pissed at him, and this king is trying to demean him and comes up with crazier and crazier objectives for Hercules.
This story arc is the basis of every video game ever made.
It is!
At the end of each level, he gets a power-up that helps him in the next level.
You're totally right. It's Mega Man. He slays the Nemenian lion and then wears the pelt. That's his +1 armor.
He's impervious as long as he wears it. Goes and slays the Hydra. The Hydra can't kill him because he's wearing the Nemenian lion.
And then later he uses the Hydra's venom to kill the Zenarian hind, which was this giant deer he was sent to capture.
Golden deer or something like that.
Builds from there. You're totally right. It is the basis of every video game ever made. I hadn't thought about it that way, but you're right.
Keeps this building up his one-ups.
And we're not going to go through every single labor because some of them are not as memorable as the others. I don't think people talk about the Cretan bull that much. Everybody knows the Hydra. This giant snake cut off one head.
The lion probably they know.
Yeah. My favorite is honestly cleaning the Aegean stables, which were these giant stables that that hadn't been cleaned for 30 years, absolutely filled to ceiling with cow shit, which he has to do in one day. He doesn't just use his strength to clean the stables. He diverts a river and floods them and washes them out. I always thought that was such a clever...
They didn't say how he had to clean them.
Right, yeah. They're all these human-eating monsters. There's the Stymphalian birds, which are human-eating birds.
With bronze beaks and...
steel feathers.
And steel feathers and poison poop.
Yeah, which is insane. There are the mares of Diomedes, which are man-eating horses.
Capture Cerberus, the three-headed dog. Who doesn't remember Cerberus?
That's the last mission. Hercules goes into the underworld and brings back the three-headed dog that guards Hades' domain. At that point, the king finally says, all right, fine.
You can be free.
Some of these ideas, you mentioned the influence this has on video games. Some of these monsters are standard enemies in so many different video games.
Like Chimera, for one.
Chimera, Medusa, and Cerberus is really what I was leaning towards. Show up in so many video games.
Well, Cerberus, he's in at least one Final Fantasy game.
Oh, yeah. A couple of different Castlevania games. Greek mythology is a big influence in general.
He was in 2, if not 3, of the God of War game.
Fictional idea of the Hellhound, this demonic dog, is inspired by Cerberus.
Yeah.
And another one we skipped over was to steal the girdle of Hepatala, queen of the Amazons. And we've already talked a little bit about the Amazon, this island of warrior women who have no use for men, and sometimes cut one of their breasts off to be better at archery.
Warrior women of the World War. Sounds like an old Grindhouse movie.
It does. Though how consensual Hepatala and Hercules' relationship varies from telling to telling. Like I said, the Greek conception of morality is a little different. Like I said, there have been tons and tons of Hercules movies over the years. Of the old sword and sandal ones from the 60s, I've seen a few. The one I liked the most was Hercules in the Underworld. Hercules in the Realm of the Spirits. It's the Mario Bava one with Christopher Lee as the bad guy. Reg Park plays Hercules in that. That was good. And did you see The Rock?
I did not see that one, but I saw the Kellen Lutz one.
Oh yeah, a couple years ago there was these dueling Hercules movies. Hercules with Dwayne Johnson, and the much more low-budget one, The Legend of Hercules with Kellen Lutz. I didn't see the Kellen Lutz one. I saw the one with The Rock, and it was pretty entertaining, honestly. I had a good time with it. You didn't see the one with The Rock, but you saw the one with Kellen Lutz.
And it was not entertaining.
I heard it was quite bad.
Lightning whip, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, it didn't look very good.
If the Minotaur is a god, he would kill us all. But if he isn't a god,
then he will burn.
To save her, Theo must kill the beast.
The Minotaur.
You know our children are sacrificed to a wild beast.
Let us see the mouth of hell.
I'm going to show you true fear.
Minotaur!
I'm here, Minotaur.
Hercules is by far the most famous of all the Greek heroes, but there are many, many, and some of which we'll be talking about. One of my favorite Greek stories is the Minotaur and the Labyrinth. It's such a prototypal horror story. You're in this giant maze, and you're being chased by a monster that's going to eat you when it finds you. Many, many people have tried. None of them, up to this point, have ever succeeded.
Because the Minotaur kills them and eats them.
Again with the flesh eating. There's a little more to the story than that. Something like the queen of Crete was raped by a bull, and the Minotaur is the result of this coupling. And in order to hide the monster, the king built a maze. They have to sacrifice people to the Minotaur a couple different times every year for some reason. Anyway, this badass named Theseus is the one who eventually
says, hey guys,
I got this.
This is not cool. Why don't I just kill the Minotaur, and then we stop sacrificing people?
We can do that? The Minotaur itself has become the stock fantasy character. It really overlooks the original intention as this terrifying monster. This giant with the head of a bull. When it finds you, it's going to tear you apart and eat you. I've always considered The Minotaur and the Labyrinth a straight-up horror story.
Pretty much is.
Yeah.
But it's also a variation of Hansel and Gretel.
Hansel and Gretel would come afterward. Some woman gives him a spool of golden thread that he lays down as he walks out, and that's how he finds his way out of the labyrinth. We can't even really go into detail influence the story has had on pop culture between the idea of a maze and the Minotaur. And there have been a couple of movies made about Minotaur specifically. There's one from the 70s with Donald Pleasance and Peter Cushing called Cult of the Minotaur, I think. And there have been a couple of different shitty sci-fi channel movies with a CGI Minotaur as the monster.
Well, there was a Minotaur that was done with practical effects in season 3 of American Horror Story.
Okay. The movie Immortals features an interpretation of Minotaur. I had forgotten this, but apparently Theseus was the main hero in that. That's who Henry Cavill played.
Yeah.
Immortals is a movie that a lot of people shit on. They shit on the post-300, post-God of War, heavy metal, Greek mythology movie wave that we got. That's probably my favorite movie out of that little subgenre.
Yeah, it actually got Greek gods doing the Greek god thing.
Is it Ares that comes down and blows a bunch of people's heads up?
Yep.
Yeah.
With his hammer.
The movie was directed by Tarsem, also directed The Cell, and a movie I love called The Fall. Tarsem's scripts are not always the best, but his visual sense is out of this world. The guy's movies are incredibly beautiful. We both like Immortals for, I think, different reasons.
Not gods being a badass. Like, what more do you want?
But at the time, you were disappointed in that movie's version of the Minotaur. That was...
Why not go for it? Looking back on it, it is an interesting take. They base it enough in realism.
It's not a guy with a literal bull head. It's a dude wearing a steel cage on his head that looks like a bull.
If looks could kill, you would be dead. Turned to stone with just one glance. This is the myth of Medusa, a monstrous female, feared by all men. But she will be challenged by a surprising enemy, the hunt for the head of Medusa.
Maybe even more famous than the Minotaur if we're talking Greek monsters that have shown up in video games and pop culture in general. Medusa.
The snake-headed lady.
Snake-haired lady.
In some versions of the myth, the Gorgons have wings.
Sometimes they are part bird in addition to being part snake.
Some versions are dog-faced women.
Yeah, there's a lot of variations.
I bet I know something you didn't look up.
What's that?
Do you know where experts believe the myth of the Gorgon began?
I do not know.
Apparently, there was a woman, got thrown off a building or something like that, and she landed and cracked the road. Her hair was fanned out, and she was bleeding.
Oh yeah, you've told me this before.
Yeah.
That's just speculation, but sure. And who knows for sure. In today's pop culture, Medusa is usually a woman with snakes for hair. When she stares at you, she will turn you to stone.
Most pop culture, too, she has a snake tail.
Yeah, which is not part of the original myth. They're actually conflating Medusa with another monster called Lamia. I mentioned Castlevania earlier. The Medusa heads are an enemy monster in every single Castlevania game.
Yeah.
The story of Medusa is a little more complicated than that. A woman displeases Athena, and as punishment, they're turned into a monster.
Yeah. The version I heard was she got raped, I think it was Poseidon, in Athena's tomb.
Right, and for punishment, Athena turned her into a monster.
Instead of Athena coming to the woman's aid, damn that man for raping you.
Right.
It's, bitch, why'd you ask for it?
Once again, the Greeks' opinion on consent was very, very different. A lot of people forget that Medusa was actually one of 3 sisters that were all Gorgons. I should have prefaced this entire episode by saying we are going to fuck up all these names. Medusa sisters, the names are especially difficult to pronounce. Cytheno and Uriel. Uriel. Anybody listening to this as a mythology degree, please correct us. Nobody remembers them. They just remember Medusa and they remember Perseus. We're talking about getting power-ups to help you defeat the monster. Perseus gets the shoes of Hermes that allow him to fly, reflective shield to protect him from Medusa. He gets a magical sword from the gods too, right?
Well, I thought he got like a helmet or something.
Yeah, the helmet is significant as well, you're right. And he gets a gold robotic owl, did you know that?
He's also like one of the sons of Zeus.
Perseus is a demigod.
Okay.
Something about how he has to get the head of Medusa to kill a sea monster.
Kraken.
In Clash of the Titans, it's the Kraken.
Release the Kraken!
We love that original movie. I believe it's from 1980 with Harry Hamlin. Ray Harryhausen doing the monster effects are out of this world. Yeah. They made that remake a few years back with Sam Worthington, which I did not care for. I've seen Clash of the Titans more recently than I have read the original myth, so if I screwed up any details, that's why. Because I know that was not the most faithful adaptation. The most notorious being switching out the Kraken, a monster from Norse mythology, and putting it in Greek mythology. That remake I really didn't like, and the sequel was somehow even worse. There's something we should mention. What happens when Medusa's head is chopped off? The blood from Medusa's head causes something to happen.
Can't remember.
It gives birth to Pegasus.
That's right, it does.
This idea of the Pegasus, this white horse with wings that flies, is the most touchy-feely element from classic mythology. Lisa Frank would always have paintings of unicorns and Pegasi. It's overlooked that Pegasi's story begins with the death of this hideous monster, Medusa. In Clash of the Titans, they gave Perseus the Pegasus, but that's actually not the name of the hero that tames the Pegasus in the original story. In the original myth, it was this hero named Bellerophon. Bellerophon? Let's call him Bell. The idea is that no human could tame Pegasus.
I bet he's a demigod. I bet he's not only a human.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he was a demigod. Weirdly, actual ancient Greeks considered Bellerophon one of the great heroes. He was more significant than Perseus or Achilles were.
Really?
Which is ironic because now he's rather obscure. The reason he needed the Pegasus to kill this monster that was fucking everybody's shit up.
The Chimera.
The word Chimera has entered genetics for any species that displays genetic attributes of other animals. animals. Did you know that?
I did know that, actually.
Yeah.
But the Greek Chimera
is way cooler.
It's a creature with a lion's head, a goat's head, and a snake's head.
The actual artistic depiction varies. It's part lion, part goat, either part snake or part dragon.
I'm familiar with the snake version.
The version I always saw had a lion's head in front corners, a goat emerging from its back, and then a snake as a tail. That was the version I always saw as a kid. In video games and comic books, this version that has 3 heads, or maybe a lion's head with a goat's hooves, and then dragon wings emerged more and more.
The one I tend to go by, because it seems the most streamlined and actually most logical, is actually from God of War. He had a lion's body, and the tail was a snake, but on top of the lion's head was the goat's head.
Does the goat's head shoot laser beams out of its eyes?
Well, of course, it's God of War game.
Of course. Gauntlet Dark Legacy had a cool chimera in it as well. That one was 3-headed.
Yeah.
If you accept the term chimera as an all-purpose term, most of the Greek monsters are chimera. They're usually one animal mashed up with another animal.
I mean, sure.
Again, the chimera has become a stock monster in video games and fantasy fictions. It's a very potent idea. But something to remember about Bellerophon's story, and a lot of these Greek stories, it ends in tragedy. After killing the chimera, he attempts to scale Mount Olympus on Pegasus. This is the hero's hubris. No man can live among the gods. And I believe he falls off the horse to his death.
Probably.
A lot of these other stories, well, we mentioned Jason and the Argonauts briefly. And if you mentioned that, you've got to talk about the Ray Harryhausen movie, which I haven't actually seen in years. I saw it as a very small child. All I remember are the Harpies and the Skeleton Warriors, which are the part of that movie everybody remembers. But Jason's story ends in tragedy, too, with the story of Medea. His wife murders not Tyler Perry's Medea. The mythological Medea, she murders her kids to get back at her husband. A lot of these Greek heroes have tragic endings. It's just a recurring theme in Greek mythology. No man can be as great as the gods. They always have to be brought down by their own hubris.
Which is ironic, considering that the gods are always brought down by their own hubris.
What's a myth on here we don't have that's important is Oedipus and the Sphinx.
Well, yeah.
I want to talk about a tragic hero. Oops, oh shit, oh no, it's my mom, ah! Goes crazy and jabs his eyes out.
Bill? Yeah, Bill has a slight Oedipus complex.
Bill and Ted has a slight Oedipus complex, yeah. As a kid, it always confused me that the Greek Sphinx is different from the Egyptian Sphinx. I know that always bugged me.
Would you mind if I ask you a few questions about being a centaur?
Go ahead. Believe me, I've heard them all.
Could you enter yourself in the Kentucky Derby?
I don't know.
Do you have sex with horses or with human women?
Neither. I'm really only attracted to other centaurs.
Okay. Do you dump wherever you're standing? Or do you use toilets? Or do you use some magical centaur toilet?
We use regular bathrooms. Are we going to discuss my medical qualifications?
The rest of the interview will be centaur questions.
Name some other monsters from Greek mythology.
Manticore.
Yeah, is the Manticore actually in Greek mythology, or was that something that was added later?
Pretty sure it was Greek mythology.
I'm sure it is, but I can't think of any specific story about the Manticore. That's one that's always been kind of cool.
It's like a lion bat thing.
No, it's a lion with the face of a man, and it had a tail of a scorpion. That's what it was. Its venom was incredibly potent.
Did it also have wings? I always seem depicted as having bat wings.
As far as I know, it didn't have wings in the original stories, but a lot of depictions give it wings. What a lot of them leave out is one of my favorite elements about the Minotaur is that it actually has 2 rows of teeth.
Yeah.
Frequently gets left out. That's one that gets mentioned a lot. What about centaurs?
Half human, half horse.
We were just talking about them last time. Talking about how centaurs are notorious for their lustiness. And that's a reoccurring theme in a lot of Greek myths. These monsters that are half man, half animal, and they have the bodies of men but the desires of animals. If you want to get really sociological, I'd like to think that the Greek saying, our self-control is what separates us from the animals. Or what about harpies? Harpies are another famous Greek monster.
Yeah.
Hideous bird women that, again, eat people.
Well, let's talk about lamia.
Okay, lamia has become my...
It's like a satyr, but with snakes.
A little bit. If you go back and listen to our Haunting Tales episode, I talk about this a little bit. Lamia is fascinating to me as an extension of the Hebrew Lilith story. The Greek story of Lamia, I believe she was a queen who did something to piss the gods off, and they made her into the snake monster. She's a woman from the waist up and a snake from the waist down. Lamia is this monster that preys on little kids. She eats babies and she seduces men, which is this classical mythological archetype that you see in almost every culture all over the world. The Hebrew Lilith is very much an extension of that. This beautiful woman that seduces men, eats babies, and it's this idea that in ancient times, any woman that rejected being married and having kids would be considered considered a monster.
And what's that one? Medusa.
Yeah, Medusa is another Greek vampire-type creature which had fire for hair and goat legs, I believe.
Something like that.
And lamia is also conflated with vampires. There are actually a couple of different types of Greek vampires, because there's also a monster called the Strix, which was a giant owl woman that drank baby blood. Always children.
Playhouse satyrs.
Talked a little bit about centaurs, and satyrs are related because they're also notorious for being these man-like creatures that had an animal's libido. And again, the satyr has become a default character type in fantasy, role-playing games, and fiction. I think the most famous of which is the Greek god Pan. Now, something I want to mention here. When I was in middle school, in music class, we watched a VHS tape about the Pan flute. And as part of this tape, they had a barely animated cartoon that was about God Pan. And there was a song in there that I will never forget that went, Pan, Pan, Greek god Pan, one half goat, the other half man. Did you watch this cartoon in grade school?
No.
Does anybody else know what the fuck I'm talking about? Because this has haunted me for 25 years. I have to see if this shit's on YouTube or something.
Google the lyrics. It'll probably come up.
It probably will. And I know there's a deeper story with Pan, but I cannot tell you what it is. We're out of topics here. Any other Greek monsters you want to mention that we didn't bring up? What about Argus? I believe that was around the same time as the Hecatoncheires, and Argus is covered completely in eyes.
Ooh.
We didn't mention him when we were talking about the labors of Hercules. What about Geryon? Giant with 3 arms, 3 heads, and 3 legs. Yeah, that's another weird one. God we didn't mention was Hecate, goddess of witchcraft.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, which if you're a modern pagan, you still invoke.
Eros, Cupid.
One of the children of Aphrodite is the god of lust, which was in our modern day culture turned into this cutesy Cupid, this little baby in a diaper with wings that shoots heart-shaped arrows at people and make people fall in love.
One of the cherubs.
A cherub is actually a different type of angel. That word is conflated with what are called putos, which are little baby angels, a visual motif in medieval artwork. Cupid is actually the Roman name. Much like Hercules and Hercules, for some reason the Roman name is what is passed in the common nomenclature. What about the Erinyes, the goddesses of revenge? Bird, bat women that seek vengeance on men who have betrayed women.
Or what about the furries?
The Furies.
The Furies.
Well, the Furies are the Roman versions of the Erinyes.
Whatever. I guess that's one that's always been mixed up. Oh, what about the Colossus?
Yeah, the Colossus of Rhodes. This massive lighthouse that was said to have been built on the island of Rhodes. Its legs would straddle the canal that the boats would come through, though a lot of actual archaeologists believe that the Colossus probably never existed.
It's still a myth.
Word Colossus is also in English as something that's really fucking big, or an X-Men.
Well, that's what I go by.
Yeah, and Sergio Leone made a decent sword and sandal movie about it.
What about a hippocamp? The water horse?
I was reading a book recently called Abominable Science that talked about the history of the sea serpent, and the author in that book said the hippocamp is frequently overlooked but very important figure in the development of the myth of the sea serpent. Because even today, a lot of sea serpents are said to have horse-like heads. It led to a lot of other creatures like the Kelpie and Scottish beliefs, which is this demonic water horse that drowns people. Greek mythology is fascinating to me because it's full of weird monsters and weird gods. We didn't really talk about Hades much, the story of Persephone.
We didn't even talk about how they chose their dominion.
Yeah, there's a story about that too, isn't there?
They drew straws. Poseidon and Zeus both tricked Hades.
Yeah, they screwed him over, but he dutifully accepts his position. In a lot of modern adaptations of Greek mythology, we like to make Hades the bad guy. We like to conflate him with the Christian Satan. The Greeks did not think of Hades as a villainous figure at all, no more than any of the other gods.
Yeah.
All the Greek gods were assholes. In a lot of ways, Hades' job was considered completely necessary. No way to get around dying.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about the way Greek mythology has influenced our modern day vernacular. What about the word Nike? Nike,
just do it.
Obviously the most famous shoe brand in the world, but Nike was the Greek goddess of victory and is usually portrayed as being Athena's pet owl.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all really, really fascinating stuff, and we could go on even longer than we already have, but I think we should wrap it up. And before we finish recording, well, first off, I want to thank Juan and Lee and David for liking the show on Facebook and liking the post on Twitter and commenting on the YouTube feeds. We really, really appreciate it. On the Harry Potter episode, Mr. David Brown asked me what my top 5 franchises were. Off the top of my head, I said to him then, I typed to him. I responded, Universal Monsters, Godzilla, James Bond, Friday the 13th, and Terminator. Those top 4, Universal Monsters, Godzilla, Bond, Friday the 13th, yeah, those are pretty much my my favorite franchises. But for number 5, I don't know if it's Terminator, I don't know if it's Highlander, I don't know if it's something else entirely that I'm just not thinking about right now. But I wanted to breach the question to you, JD. If you had to pick 5 franchises as your favorites, what would they be? It's a tricky question, isn't it?
Well, Batman, because there's only one movie that I hate out of like all 20 of them.
Batman's one of your favorite things, period.
Well, I mean, come on. Godzilla is up there with Batman.
We did do 4 whole episodes devoted to it, so...
Well, yeah, but Godzilla is like the man.
He's the king of monsters.
He is the king of the monsters.
And we're both very excited for the new movie, which is finally moving into production. But beyond those two, what's 3, 4, and 5?
Probably the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
What about Star Wars? You love Star Wars.
Do love me some Star Wars.
Or is Lord of the Rings in your top 5? You love Lord of the Rings.
Well, Star Wars is definitely in the top 5.
And hey, what of Mr. Freddy Krueger, who I know you're a large admirer of?
Yeah, he'd probably have to be in my top 5.
So Lord of the Rings gets pushed out, is what you're telling me.
See, that one I'm just not sure about. I like the Hobbit films, but they're
not. Yeah.
Lord of the Rings was so good.
That applies to Star Wars too, because the first 3 Star Wars are great, but then the next 3 are
yeah, but see though, I still really enjoyed the prequel trilogies. Other than Phantom Menace, that one gets hate all around.
What about Lethal Weapon, which we talk about non-stop on this show?
There's aliens, there's universal monsters. I don't know that I can choose just 5. Like I could probably do a top 10, but I don't know that I could do top 5. I feel like I'm leaving something out, you know?
Same! Well, man, I love RoboCop, but like the rest of that series is not so hot. I love Highlander, but the rest of that series is not so hot. But I kind of love how stupid that entire franchise is. And if we open it up to multimedia stuff, then we're doomed. There's just too much stuff to say there.
This might be an episode. We might have to...
It probably could be. Thank you so much for causing so much conversation, David, and thank you so much for your continued support.
But seriously, guys, we love questions like that, so please, ask away. We will answer as many as we can.
And anytime you ask us like a really nerdy question about ranking stuff, that sends us off on long conversations.
Just ask us anything. We don't care. We'll answer them. Well,
we'll answer questions about our sex lives.
Well, no, we won't answer questions about those.
More episodes coming soon. There's some really cool stuff coming up next month that I'm very excited for. Man, you know what I really have a hankering for? Some gyros.
Gyros?
Yeah.
You mean gyros?
If you say gyro to an actual Greek guy, he will punch you in the face.
But you know what my problem is?
What's that?
I don't like feta.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of feta either. But shaved meat and a pita, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
This idea sounded like a much smoother ending in my brain.
Yeah.
This is the story of the Greek god Pan, one half goat, the other half man. He had a curly beard and horns on his head. He really was a panic, the Greeks all said. Pan, Greek god Pan, one half goat, the other half man. Pan would caper through the woods and fields, dancing, singing, and kicking his heels. Protecting the shepherds who guarded the sheep, they prayed to him as they went to sleep. Pan, Greek god Pan, one half goat, the other half man. A nymph named Syrinx caught his eye. He wanted to play, but she said, not I. Then began a merry chase. She ran like a deer. 'Twas a very close race. I can't escape him, I can't hide. Someone save me, Syrinx cried. Her sisters came with all due speed. Their magic changed her to a water reed. Pan, Greek god Pan, one half goat, the other half man. Why did Syrinx scream and run? All I wanted was to have some fun. Well, Pan, my boy, as my father would say, tomorrow is another day. Pan, Greek god Pan, one half goat, the other half man.